Yeah, let's go. We're going to talk about wood elves today. Cool, cool, cool. Already did my checks. I'm actually on top of my game today, and that's super weird. Usually I'm a little all over the place, and today I'm just like, I'm killing it. Killing the rap game, son. Not really. It'd be funnier if I was. Little chat test, just so I can make sure everything's hooked up the way it should be. Twitch, YouTube, there we go. Heck yeah. All right, so today we're gonna it's a little early, and I know it's a little early, and I'm sorry for that, but we're gonna talk about wood elves, and I'll tell you why it's early. We're gonna talk about the wood elves book, kind of like we did the goblins and orc book, because that's the other army I'm really like pumped to kind of look through and dig into a bit more. We're gonna go over a document that was leaked and then subsequently released by Warcom, and it has to do with comp play, and we're gonna discuss that a little bit. And if If the 40K data slate drops, we're going to discuss that a little bit too. So this could end up being a long one. That's why I wanted to start early. If you are new to the channel, I talk a lot anyway, so it could probably be a long one. And I try to be as interactive with people in the chat as I can. So if you're out there and you're watching, make sure you're chiming in. I love having the conversations. I don't want to just sit here and talk at people. I want to talk with the community. Oh my gosh. There we go. So, Wood Elves, let's actually before we start with the Wood Elves, let's dig into the Warhammer community article first. Because that's not going to take as much time. And I found that very, very interesting. And I know some people were just like, oh, this is crap. Which is weird, because I think it's a very positive interaction. Let's go to the full screen. Boop. There we go. So you can actually see what I'm seeing. You still get to look at my handsome face. Too bad Dan the Man-Man's not out there today because my hair is on point this time. All right. Other good news while I'm pulling this up is I'm getting ready to start back in school. I was about 10 months from graduating with my bachelor's degree in English. I was in the process of becoming. What the hell is that? I don't know that notification. Oh, all right. Sorry, I'm turning it off now. I was in the process of getting my English degree, going to get my teaching license, and I was going to do teaching. Obviously, that's what you do with a teaching license. And then the fire happened, and for the last roughly 18 months, I've just been kind of rebuilding my life. And I just got everything squared away with the VA and the school. I start back up in March. I'll have 10 months till I graduate, then get my teaching license, and then I should be teaching within the next yearish or so. So I'm pretty excited about that. Life is moving in a very good and positive direction. I've been working on, obviously, the mental health quite a bit, as I've shared with everybody. So I will give another small update on that here soon. I'm not going to waste any more time on it today. Let's get into what we want to get into. First of all, let's go to downloads. Let's check there first. I think that's where it's at. No, maybe it's articles. Beep, 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 boop, 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 boop. All right, I got to find this. Let's just go to articles first. I don't want to have to pull it up where I found it. I didn't even find it. It was sent to me. The old world. I think we just did that. News. There's the legacy PDFs. It has to do with the event, so it might not be specific to old world. And although I would think it would be in here. Let's check here real quick. Legends. What is that? Why metal models? Sorry, it's just like a little inside joke for my group. Nope, this is not it. I mean, I've done the FAQ, but all right. Let me see. Let's see. Marching classic. Where was the Warcom article with that? See if my buddy knows where it's at off the top of his head. Let's see. Do. Remember when I said I was like ready to go this time, and then I wasn't actually ready to go this time? Eee. Oh well. Stormcast, Vodcast, Warcry, Kill Team, Old World. We did downloads. Ooh, what if it's... Dude, I would think it would be here. Well, if I don't find it, I'll pull it up. I'll have to pull a tab up, open off the screen so I can grab my email and pull it up there. So let's do that while I'm waiting to see if my homie has the article. And some of you have probably already seen this, like I said. Yes, this is what I want. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. Open. Of course it does. Man, I hate Reddit so much. Like, first of all, it's just not a very intuitive platform. Second of all, just like anything else on the internet, it's kind of just a cesspool. Let me see if there's a link to the article in the post. All right. So, maybe. The event pack. Maybe that's what it is. I bet it do. Yeah, it is. All right, perfect. Let me whip this over here. Goodness, I'm sorry. All right. Mustering an army and painting. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. All right, so let me make sure you guys can see that. Yes, you can. As described on page 278 of the Warhammer, the Old World, blah, 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 there is an additional limit of 0 to 3 applied to any units that are not otherwise restricted by the army composition list you are using. For example, if you are fielding an Empire of Man army using the Grand Army composition list, you can only include 1 veteran state troops per 1,000 points, but you can field as many of the Free Company militia as you wish. However, for Warhammer Worlds event, you can only include 3 of the company militia. Note that any units taken as detachments, which I haven't dug into the detachment stuff, so we're not going to worry about that. And then mercenaries can be used at the event. And then I believe there was a clause somewhere about allies, and maybe I already passed it. Let's just Control F is my friend. Allied contingents are not used at this event. So this is an official GW event at Warhammer World, okay? And this went exactly like I thought it would. I even said in one of the videos I would expect some sort of rule of 3, and I would expect allies to not get used. I probably said expect mercenaries as well, but they're going to allow mercenaries, no allies, rule of 3. I'm not going to pull up the Reddit link that posted this originally. This is in the Old World Tournament pack for Warhammer World is where this is. It's not on the website. You'll have to go to Eventbrite and dig it up for yourself. Actually, here, I might be able to just post this link in the chats if you want to get it yourself. Now, I think this is great. There has been some contentious reaction from mostly people who don't go to events or tournaments. And it's been weird to see. Like, I read through that Reddit thread, and this is why I don't spend any time on Reddit, because nobody can just be like, yeah, whatever, that's fine, doesn't affect me, or yeah, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Like, everybody has to have an opinion, and they need to make it heard. Obviously, I'm included in that because here I am on the internet making videos telling you my opinions. But it's one of those where it can devolve very quickly into this weird, toxic kind of, oh, tournament players are the worst. They're always trying to break things. And if you dig through that thread, you'll find some of that. And you'll find some of those guys going, "Oh, tournament players are always breaking stuff. I'm glad you're limiting tournament players. That way I'm still allowed to break stuff." Like, it was not verbatim, but that is the gist of what was said in one of the comments. And I just thought, man, what a weird community we have where people are just like, it's okay for me to do this, but it's not okay for you to do this type of thing. Like, either all the armies should be busted good or all the armies should be average to the best of the ability of the game. And that's just how I feel. Like, if you have one or two that are busted and everything else is just poopy or average, that's not a good, healthy game, right? Everything should either be really good, which makes really good the average, which just makes everything average, or everything should just be average or really bad. But the point is that the average should be the average. We should not have these crazy outliers the way we have had. It shouldn't be this huge spike curve. It should just be like maybe a gradual, like we have one or two things that are meh. Anyway, you get my point. Uh, but again, my opinion on this is I'm a fan. I think this is great for the game. I think it's healthy for competitive play. I detest spam in a war game. It's generally speaking, spam does not reward skill. Spam is, I don't actually know how to play this game, so I'm going to take the most broken things I can and I'm just going to smash that button over and over and over until somebody figures out how to beat it. And as a person who tries to play high skill armies, I don't expect everybody to have the time devoted that I have, but I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. It's not fun, right? It's not fun if you have a busted unit and everybody that plays your army just takes 10 of that unit so that every game's the same and it's not you're not hot take taking the busted stuff doesn't make you good at the game even if you get wins. And as a person who likes competitive play, I appreciate skill a lot more than I do spam and net listing. Now, there's nothing wrong with either of those. I'm not saying that if you do it, you're a bad player, and I'm not saying that if you do it, you're a bad person. I'm simply saying, from my perspective, how I view the game, it requires more skill to play a wider variety of units, and I appreciate the diversity that you could bring and still show off your skill at the game. So, again, I'm not trying to put anybody down for it, and I know it probably sounded that way, but that's not the intent. It's just one of those, like, as a person who is very frustrated with 40K right now because of the state of the game, I have some strong feelings about that specific interaction. So it's just some of that comes out, you know. But again, if you're one of those people, I'm not putting you down. Like I get it. If you don't get to go to events very often, and you're just like, well, I'm going to go pay money to play. I want to give myself the best chance to win with my army, so I'm just going to play whatever the best stuff is in my army at this event. Sure, I get that interaction. You know, if you're a dad and you've got a, like a full-time job and you're working overtime and you only get like 1 game to 2 games a month in, so when you go to a tournament, you want to at least give yourself a chance to win some games. Like again, I get that interaction. It's just from a person who we don't need to keep talking about it. I think you get the point. So, I also like it because it does, like I said, it forces diversity in units. And last time I checked, these are supposedly war games. And it's one of those where your army should kind of look like an army, right? Because it's a war game. And that's also part of my perspective on this. So if your army just looks like a bunch of tanks, it's not an army. I mean, I guess it could be part of an army, and I get that. But if you're just like, here's 10 dreadnoughts, sure, man. But that's not how armies actually work. Rarely would you see, and again, I know I'm comparing real world armies to magical space opera, but rarely would you see a combat force like that with no ground troops. Rant over. This is my doc that I wanted to show you. It's not mine, obviously, but this is the document I wanted to show everybody. Little quick discussion on that. Really just kind of a rant, but I love it. I think it's great. I'll be adopting it at my events. I'm sure I'll get some feed or kickback from a few players, but I think generally speaking, the community will appreciate it and they will look back on it and go, okay, this is actually a good idea. Because the first time I lift that ban and they have to deal with some of the more high skilled players that can just spam now, that's when they're going to be like, oh, can we just go back to that? So overall, very good, very healthy for the community. Games Workshop, I approve. Not that you care, but you get my seal of approval on this one. All right. Now that, like I said, rant's over, we're going to jump back over to, not you, here. Yeah. Let's talk about some wood elves, guys. Let's do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Just fixing something over here. All right, perfect. I thought the Forest Realm. We're not going to read all that. That's just a bunch of background. Wood Elf Realms Army List, the Grand Army Comp List. We're going to start there. We're going to do it just like the Goblin video, and we will. Just like the Goblin video. Up to 50% of your army's points value may be spent on characters, one Glade Lord or Spellweaver per 1,000 points. And again, if you remember 8th Ed, this is just like the Lord category. One Tree Man Ancient per 1,000 points. Let's go. I know. Oh, I don't have them right next to me. I was gonna say I know they're gonna re-release the old Tree Men. I'm not playing them. I've got the new Sylvaneth, which actually came out, if I remember right, in 8th edition. I've got that fantasy box. Like, I've got the big, massive Tree Men that came out. That's what's sitting the table. I don't care. I'll put them on the right size base. They'll look dumb on their tiny little bases, but that's what we're doing, guys. I'm not interested in hearing anybody complain. So one Tree Man Ancient per 1,000 points. And then Glade Captain, Spell Singers, Shadow Dancers, Waystalkers, and Branch Wraiths. So again, very, very similar to what we saw with the Goblins, where you get up to a handful of Lords, right? You can take one Lord or Spellweaver, well, I'll have to call my mom later. Let me text her real quick. All right. One Tree Man per 1,000 points, just like the Goblins and Orcs. There we go. Sorry, I had to kind of recalibrate my brain. It is the EPUB. I went and got the EPUB, and it's phenomenal. I like it, and it is definitely worth if you've got it. Oh shit! Dang, I got two moms. What's up, David? Uh, It is. It's super nice and clean. It's very easy to navigate. There's a lot of links in it that you can click. Oh, thanks, thanks. There's a lot of links that'll take you where you need to go in it. It is fantastic. So if you were on the fence of getting the EPUBs, hands down, recommend them. I got the hard book and it didn't come in time, so I was just like, I need to make some videos, and then I just went ahead and bought some EPUBs. Unfortunately for me, as an employee, like I don't get any kind of break on the EPUBs or anything, so I had to pay the big naughty retail price on it. So at least 25% of your army's points value must be core, and that would be you have to take at least one unit of Glade Guard, which is pretty standard. I want to say they've always had that. You could take Eternal Guard, Dryads, and Glade Riders. Yeah, I'm on the fence about getting the EPUB, or wait forever for the damn physical book. So I would say, what books did you order, and what do you need, and how soon do you want to get playing? Right. The core rules, I think you should I'm guessing you'd have at least one person in your play group with the core rule book. I would at least grab the army book on EPUB, if nothing else, just so you can look at your army and see what it does. That would be my suggestion. Eternal Guard, Dryads, and Glade Riders. Dryads are super cool. I like them. That's one of my favorite models. That's what kind of pulled me into Wood Elves to begin with. I was just like, oh shit, I can get tree people. I can grab me some treeple. And then you can take one unit of Deepwood Scouts as a core choice per 1,000 points, and we'll kind of dig into all that in a minute. And then your specials are your Deepwood Scouts, Wildwood Rangers, War Dancers. War Dancers are so cool. Sisters of the Thorn, Wild Riders, and Warhawk Riders. And then up to 2 units of Treekin per 1,000 points. And Treekin are dope. I love me some Treekin. And then going back to what we just talked about, if you weren't here for it, the rule of 3 that's being implemented by GW at their events won't apply to the Treekin because they already have a restriction. So if your units already have a restriction, the rule of 3 won't apply. So I could actually take 4 units of Treekin if I so desired. Which, given the models that I have right now, that could be part of my army comp. Just because I have mostly Sylvaneth right now, I don't have a ton of the elf side. And then 25% of your army can be rare. You can take Treemen, 1 unit of Way Watchers per Way Stalker, and then 3 Great Eagles, 0 to 3 Great Eagles per 1,000. Yeah, no one here is wanting to pull the trigger besides me. Even if I do, I'm starting over, so it'll probably be a couple months before I'm good to go. But I want to spend the next couple months theory crafting. That's fair, man. Um, so locally, I tend to be the organizer for most of our events. Like I'm big into competitive play in the community side of it. Like I love the community that it builds and brings together. So if my group that I work with, if I'm like, hey, we should check this game out, generally I can get a few of them to go, yeah, okay, and then we can build it from there. And I'm just very thankful to have that kind of community where if one of us decides, hey, this is a game we should kind of look at, we can all pivot a little bit and then slow build that community. We're not starting with like 1 or 2 people whenever we decide to head into a game. We're usually starting with like 5 to 8 people. And a good example of that was when I started dipping my toe into Sigmar this edition. I've got buddies who spearhead a Sigmar community, and so I was able to just kind of step into events and get games in with their community. And between them and then the few guys from my community that play Sigmar, we've been able to merge it together into one bigger community. And so now, like, our 40K community is regionally pretty large, and then our Sigmar community is regionally growing and getting pretty large as well. So, very long-winded comment on what you said, but it's just one of those where I'm just super lucky to be blessed with a good, healthy community that is willing to kind of like take that plunge. But I get it. I've been there, man. Especially being, I don't know where you're at, but if you have a smaller gaming community, it makes it real tough to convince people to play something outside of what they would normally play. Locally, there's about 5 to 6 people who play. Everyone else is so wrapped up in Magic and 40K. A couple of the lads are interested, but can't justify 120 on the core, and then another 80ish on the army books just to dip their toes in. I can see myself at least getting into it, even if no one else does. Uh, where are you at, if you don't mind me asking? Because I'm not sure based on those prices. Because that's not my prices on stuff, and so it's one of those. I'm just curious. And honestly, yep, I was kind of curious if it was Australia or Canada, just because your prices tend to be a little higher than they are here in America. So yep, I could definitely see that. What would probably do well, is if everybody kind of chipped in on a book and then you shared it on a hard book, right? And that's where I'm going to leave that comment. Because that's probably how I would approach it, being where you're at. I grew up in a very rural community in America, and my playgroup was very small, and I was in high school at the time, and we didn't have EPUBs and things like that. So a lot of us would go to the hobby stores, and when the books were still like $50, if there were 3 or 4 of us, we would all just chip in, and then whoever was the one that would typically do the teaching would hold the book the longest and just learn it and then teach. And then if anybody wanted it, we would split it between us. And it worked well in high school. I would like to think as adults it would work just as well. But that would be maybe how I'd approach it, because you only need, depending on what everybody needs, you only need 2 to 3 books, right? So it's one of those where if we're talking 120, 80, 200, 280, and you've got 6 people that could split it, like now you're only talking, you know, it's a lot less money. You get where I'm going with it. At 280 divided by 6, you're talking about 50 a player, and then everybody could just have access to all 3 hard books, right? Because I'm not condoning sharing anything digital, and I mean that. I don't want my boss to come in here and be like, bro, you can't be telling people that. And I'm not. I'm saying buy the hard books, share them. All right, so 25% of your points value may be spent on a single allied contingent drawn from any Wood Elf Realms army of, yeah, blah, 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 blah. We don't need any of this. So again, same exact as the other thing, right? Oh, and the other thing, I'm going to say, is that Sakari, I assume? The other thing I would suggest is, even if you get the books and you take the time to teach somebody, once they play it, they're going to buy it. Like, this game is fantastic. I haven't put it on the table yet, but as a person who's played old fantasy, like I played 5th, 6th, and 7th, I can tell by reading the rules that if you liked any of the older fantasy, you're going to like this. This game is fantastic. All right, so let's look at the Wood Elf Nobles. Can we see? I'll zoom in just a little bit. And this is what I mean by the links. So like hand weapon, the Azrael longbow, and then it just gives you the link to where you need to find that rule. Fantastic EPUB. Is definitely worth it to me, especially if you have a tablet or something that you could take with you to play games. Excuse me. So this handsome fella is 135 points for the Lord, 70 points for the Captain. Weapon skill 7 or 6, ballistic skill 7 or 6. So these are going to be very Swiss Army knife. Like, these are going to be able to interact. These are every phase units. And that was one of the things I always liked about the Wood Elves, is they're kind of an every phase army. You can take all melee, you could take all shooting. I don't recommend taking all shooting, because their range is pretty good, but it's still not great. And the game is still designed to be played on the bigger tables, which will help you out a little bit. But also, your stuff is paper mache, so if anything touches it, you're going to want something in melee that can do damage first before you just pick up a lot of your stuff. Just some things to keep in mind. He could take an additional hand weapon or a great weapon. And I need to look up great weapons and how they interact. I assume they get like they lower their initiative. You know what? Let's not talk about it. Let's be about it today. Wow. Again, Sorry if I'm a little out there today. I got sick early last week, and I have just been like on the struggle bus ever since. And where I live, it's just like been about 10 degrees, snowing, ice, freezing rain, all kinds of stuff like that. And for the last couple days, it's been like 35 degrees, 30 degrees, which is super warm for this time of year. And I've just now started after about a week of feeling kind of sick. I've just now started feeling better. I was able to get out and walk outside today because the weather's been good. So it's one of those like I'm motivated. I'm ready to go. I'm pumped. All right, so we want great weapons. So if I'm like high energy today, that's why, is I'm just really feeling it. Great weapons are especially large and heavy when wielded with both hands. Not when, and wielded with both hands. Like, what was that old Dungeons and Dragons feat you could take in third edition? It was like monkey grip. You could use a great weapon in one hand. I can't believe I remembered that. So they get strength +2, AP -2. Okay, armor bane requires two hands, strike last. So strike last, if I remember right, just sets your initiative to 1. Let's make sure that works. And I'm curious to know if the elves have something that interact with that. Because strike first sets you to 10. Strike last sets you to 1. Yep. Okay, that's what I figured. And that should be before any other modifiers. So there's a good chance the elves will have something. Plus, if you charge, I believe it gives you initiative bonus. So it's one of those where you could, like, I bet elves are still going to, like, yes, if you get them both, they'll cancel each other out. I haven't looked at the elf rules yet. Gotcha. Yeah, that I haven't looked at high elves yet, right? That's what you're talking about is the high elf sword masters. Those guys are brutal, man. And that checks out. So great weapons, cavalry spear, can take a shield, may take enchanted arrows. So the bodkins and stuff, all these are really cool. We're going to dig into these later. They're really cool. I've looked at those quite a bit. He can be mounted. The mounts are pretty cool. I need to get some dragons. I don't have any of that anymore. I've got like a handful of dark elves that I'm just going to be cosplaying as wood elves while I wait for GW to give me some models. And then can take Forest Spites. Some of those are pretty interesting. And then the Glade Lord can take 100 points. The Captain can take 50 points of magical items. Again, you're going to see this format is basically the same as the Orc and Goblin that we just did. Now, he does have the Arrow of Kurnos, and we'll talk about that. He has Evasive, Fire and Flee. Fire and Flee is phenomenal. Like, that is a great rule. I love it. Ignores cover, move through cover, rallying cry, and strike first. So they do get strike first, so they'll just fight at initiative. Cool. And that's I hadn't looked at that yet because, like I said, all I have are the wood, the tree people. So it's one of those where I haven't taken the time to look at the elf side of the army a ton yet, and that's why I wanted to do this so we could just all do it together. Arrow of Kurnos. Once deployment is complete, but before the roll-off to determine which player takes the first turn, if the general of your opponent's army is within 36 inches of one or more models in your army that has this rule, one of them may fire the arrow. If the arrow of Kurnos is fired, the general of your opponent's army immediately suffers a strength 3 hit with no armor or regen permitted. Ward saves can be attempted as normal. If it is fired, your opponent adds 1 to their roll when rolling off to determine who takes first turn. So it's just a single strength 3 hit. And if you have a ward, you get your ward. So you still have to roll the wound. Again, this is one of the things I absolutely love about fantasy and its interaction is generally speaking, you'll always have to roll a wound roll. Even if it's a mortal wound, if you're cheap shot. Yep. And that's it, is you're just getting a cheeky little cheap shot in there. Even if you're, I'm trying to think, even if you're getting a mortal wound, if you're familiar with the 40k terminology, you still have to roll the wound roll, and then you'll still, if you have a ward save, get it. Some of them you'll get your regen. Like, very rarely will something just say, you get damage, there's no way to mitigate it, go to hell. And that's always been one of my favorite aspects of fantasy as compared to things like Sigmar or 40K is there's very few rules that are just like pick up your model outside of killing blow, but even killing blow you get like ward and regen before you just pick up your model. Maybe not regen, but you get what I'm saying. Wood Elf Mages, so these are toned down, not necessarily because they are weaker, but because magic was toned down. If you're on Twitch, there's going to be, oh, you're on an ad break, sorry. They are 25 by 25s. They have a hand weapon. A Spell Weaver is a level 3, can upgrade to level 4. They could take Battle Magic, Elementalism, High Magic, Illusion. I will stay on this until Twitch gets back. They could take the Talismanic Tattoo special rule, which is just a ward save, if I remember right, which is pretty cool. May be mounted, may take Forest Spites, can be a level 4 wizard, purchase magic items, and then the Spell Singer is just the weaker form of that. They have Elven Reflexes, Lore of Athel magical attacks, and move through cover. Let's check out move through cover real quick. Let's actually move through cover. All right, move through cover. Well-trained or naturally skilled warrior. All right. Yeah, I don't like these sorts of rules where X just deletes Y and that kind of stuff feels cheap. I know it's supposed to simulate something being real powerful. But then it becomes a game of who can field more one-shot things and less about actual tactics. Exactly. And that's one of the things I touched on at the beginning of the stream. I don't know if you were there when I first started. Is Games Workshop has released their packet for their first Old World event, and that's at Warhammer World. And it has implemented a rule of 3, and you cannot take allies. And I'm all for it for a competitive play standpoint. I love it. I think it's phenomenal. I know reading like the Reddit post on it, there were people who were up in arms in it, but I think it's great because it forces people to diversify their armies and actually learn the mechanics and play the game. And that's where I'm at with it. You know, again, if you feel differently, that's okay. You don't have to play at Games Workshop events, so it's one of those like you can play. Your group can play it without the competitive play rules. Another group can play it with the competitive play rules, and that's the beauty of the way Games Workshop has structured their rule system. Is that if you want the competitive play experience, it's not baked into the core rules, and then if you don't want it, then you just play the core rules. And I think it's a smart play. If we were looking at the Spell Singers and the Spell Weavers, if you're on Twitch, I'm just checking out Move Through Cover again. Models with this special rule do not suffer any modifiers, movement characteristics through difficult or dangerous terrain, and they can re-roll ones when making dangerous terrain tests. Okay, so they've got Elven Reflexes, Lore of Athaloran, magical attacks, and move through cover. So the Spell Weavers and Spell Singers still pretty good looking. Magic has been toned down quite a bit. Like you're not rolling 50,000 magic dice pool dice, which, as fun and silly as it could be, it could definitely be really overbearing if you didn't have access to that kind of stuff. Shadow Dancers. Uh, they're the closest thing to the Trickster God that the Trickster God has to a priesthood, blah, 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 blah. These are pretty cool. A Shadow Dancer may be a wizard. It is a wizard that, yeah, yes, agree. The magic rules, and so, like I said, I haven't been able to put it on the table yet just because of weather and kids being sick or having, like, snow days because we got dumped on. I think over the course of a week, we probably got 12 to 16 inches of snow. And today it's just been warm and foggy, so we've had a lot of e-learning and we've had a lot of people being sick, so I haven't been able to get out much. That's why I'm not streaming a game today. I'm doing this because my opponents have been sick or just like not able to get out. And so it's one of those where tomorrow, I've got 3 games on deck already, and it's just going to be teaching people how to play, and I'm so pumped. I've spent like hours making movement trays so that when I'm playing, I can actually have a good experience with my opponents. Phenomenal, phenomenal. I cannot express how much joy I have right now knowing that I'm going to get to spend a whole day playing this tomorrow. So they could take one of the following. So they could take Battle Magic or Illusion. I haven't dug into either of those schools yet. Spear of Loic, which we can look at in a minute. Trickster's Blade, which we can look at in a minute. May take Forest Spites. Be a level 1 wizard. You can't make him level 2 or her. Doesn't matter. Like, I just use him, guys. Not because of anything other than it's just how I talk. A long time in the army and a long time in the infantry where it was all guys when I was in. So it's just one of those where it's just kind of my vernacular. And can take 50 points worth of magic items. They have Evasive, Furious Charge. What is that? Some of these I've looked at, and I just haven't committed them to memory yet. During a turn in which it made a charge move of 3 inches or more, model with this special rule gains a +1 modifier to its attack characteristic. That's pretty spicy. It's a +1 attack if you made a charge move of 3 inches or more. Keep in mind, that doesn't mean roll 3 or higher. That means your actual movement has to have been 3 or more. Immune to Psychology, Loner. I'm still learning, man. Once I get it on the table, a lot of this stuff will just get committed to memory. Loner is interesting. They can't join a unit unless the unit has Loner, and the only reason I remember that is because the Cave Squig has it, and I think the Squig Hoppers might have it, but I'd have to double check that. It's just a weird interaction. I'm not opposed to it. It's just one of those where it was like, oh, that's kind of strange. Move through cover we just looked at. Strike first. Talismanic Tattoos, which is a ward save, and the Troubadour of Loc. The Troubadour of Loc, a shadow dancer that joins a unit of war dancers, and I love war dancers, man. Love them. I had some back when I played before. I don't have any physical models right now. That's where I think my Dark Elf Corsairs are just going to cosplay as war dancers for now, just so I can get something on the table. Until I can get some actual War Dancer models, because those things are gorgeous too. A Shadow Dancer that joins a unit of War Dancers is considered to have the Dances of Loic special rule for as long as they remain with the unit, which just means it can perform the War Dance as well. Spear of Loic, Combat Strength +1, -1 AP, Armor Bane 2, Killing Blow. That's pretty meaty. And then Trickster's Blades is extra attacks and requires 2 hands. Ooh, gosh, that's actually like, I would have to consider which one I wanted. Hand weapons at strength 4, no AP, but you're getting 3 plus a D3 attacks. Or the spear, you're just getting your base attacks. Like, good night. Probably would lean towards the Trickster's Blades because I just like rolling dice. And if he gets the dances that the War Dancers get, you can modify those attacks with some neat rules. Waystalkers. Are these the skirmish guys? No. Okay. They're regular infantry. Blah, 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 blah. They can take an additional hand weapon. So they have a hand weapon and a longbow, and they can take an additional hand weapon for +3 points. May take one of the following types of enchanted arrows. So that's one of the cool things too, is you can kit your core units out and all the different units out with enchanted arrows. You don't have a ton of, like, you have a lot of options, but if I remember right, you can't repeat them. But like, a lot of these are pretty good. I don't think I looked at any of them and thought, wow, these are bad. True flight arrows, blah, 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 blah. May take light armor for +3 points. Can take forest spites. Some of those are pretty good. May have the ambusher special rule. I think that's just coming from off the table. Yep, they can be held in reserve. I'm not going to dig through that too deep. May purchase magic items up to 50 points, so you can give this unit magic items. Obviously, you can still take your banner. That I kind of breezed over when we were talking about army construction, because again, it worked just like it did in Orcs and Goblins. You can take a hero, you can slap a banner on it, you can give him a magical banner, etc. Reflexive, Elven Reflexes, Faint Flight. Faint Flight's really good. That's the one where you can fall back and then automatically rally when somebody declares a charge against you, if I remember right. That one's really, really good. I like it. Fire and Flee is really good. Oh, wait. Yep. And Fire and Flee is basically you can shoot Overwatch. What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah. There is a limit on it. I think that's what it was. Let's see. That was here. Oh, I'm in the rule book. That's why. Boop boop boop. You might need a unit of Glade Guard per unit. Because these are Way Watchers. Or, Yep, 0 to 1 Way Watchers per Way Stalker. You are correct. I couldn't remember if it was that. Something used to, and maybe they still do, but something used to have a limit based on how many Glade Guard you had. Let's see. Wood Elf Mages. Evasive, Feint Flight, Fire and Flee. Like, they have everything. Hawk-Eyed Archer. Can target enemy character it can draw line of sight to regardless of the usual rules. For targeting lone characters, model with this special rule can target a specific model within its star. So they're snipers, which is gross. That's the thing that caught me out with orcs and goblins. I started making lists, not realizing you have to have a black orc. Yes, and you can take one unit of black orcs as core if you have, I think, the black orc boss, right? The war boss. I don't remember if it's one core per or if it's just you get one of them as core if your general is. But it's if that's I think that's what it is you can make one of them core if your general is a black orc war boss. I don't have so my orcs and goblins army is almost 100% goblins and squigs. I think I have like 5 orcs, but I have like 10,000 points worth of goblins. It's absurd. But yeah, they have a ton of stuff going on here. And they're pretty spicy, right? Or he does. She, whatever, because it's a character. Tree Man Ancients. Now this is what I've got, right? Like I've got a Durthu, so you need 2, and you can make 1 core and 1 special. Correct. I believe that is what it is. I'm going again off of memory, but I want to say yes. You'd need 2 bosses for 2 units, but I think there's some other things that allow you to take them. And it might be, you know what? Rather than speculate, we'll just take a quick break before we dig into Tree Men. Because like I said, I bought them all. I was just like, we're doing this, friend. I don't care. I want to teach people to play. I want to play. I want to make videos. So let's just pull it up real fast. Let's see. All right, so Black Orc. And it may just be that you can only take, like, just one gets to be core. That might be all it is. You might not have a restriction on how many you can take. Let's find out. Black Orc mobs, any model, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and that's fair. Let's see. Boop, 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 boop. Boop. The Wolf Riders, dude, those look really good. Magic items. Biggins, Choppas, the boys. Your army must include 1 Black Orc boss for every Black Orc mob it includes. Yes. So you would need, if you wanted to take 3 Black Orc mobs, you need at least 3 Black Orc bosses. And if your general is a Black Orc boss, then one of them can be core instead of special. Yep. Perfect. All right, so let's jump back over to the tree men. I love these things. Like I said, that's what got me the tree men and the dryads and stuff. That's where I was like, wood elves, super fun, love them. They have oaken fists and strangle roots and arboreal armor, which counts as full plate. Let's see what that means, because that doesn't say heavy. Oh, okay, so heavy armor's 5 plus, full plate's 4 plus. There's no medium armor. That's where my confusion was. Okay, cool, cool, cool. And there may not have been medium armor. I've played other games like this, so my brain could just be confusing rules from other games. But that's what it is. All right. So they have 4 up base save. Treeman is a level 2 wizard. Interesting. So he could upgrade to level 3 or level 4. I like that. And then he could take Forest Spites. And then he gets Battle Magic or Elementalism. Close Order, Flammable, Immune to Psychology. Flammable's pretty cool. It's one of the things I do like about fantasy also is that you have these types of rules that make sense. Like, oh, this troll has regen, but if you have flaming attacks, it shuts off his regen save. I love it. Immune to Psychology, Large Target, Lore of Athaloran, Magical Attacks, Move Through Cover, Regenerate 5 up, Stomp Attacks D3, Stubborn, Terror, Timber, Tree Spirit, Tree Whack. Like he's got a laundry list of stuff, and they're good. Like they're T6, 6 wounds, 4 up base save is nothing to sneeze at. A 5 up regen. Now the Oaken Fists are strength user -2 AP, so they're gonna be strength 6. He's only got 3 attacks, but they're still pretty meaty. And then he still gets his D3 stomp attacks. And then Strangle Roots are 12-inch range that are strength 6 -1, multiple shots D6 +1. So that's, again, pretty solid. He's not crazy, but he's good, he's resilient, and you just got to hope your opponent doesn't just burn him, right? Branch Wraiths, these are, oh gosh, I moved all my tree men over to that shelf. I was going to pull it up. So Branch Wraiths you can still buy on the website. They're the old resin ones. I've got one. It's a level 1 wizard. Do they have the Branch Witches? Because if they don't have Branch Witches, you could just use those two, right? Level 1 wizard, you can upgrade it to level 2. And again, you can take hand weapons or great weapons. They don't have fight first, and that is important. They get a different set of rules than the elf side because they'll get a ward save, they'll get a few other things like so it's almost like you have these 2 different armies in one. Now, don't get me wrong, they're still not incredibly resilient, although the branch wraiths being T4 is pretty solid. Sapwood Flesh, so they have a 6-up base save. So they have a 6-up save. I believe the Tree Spirit gives them a ward and then regen. The best thing you could do, all 3 now, right? Armor, ward, and regen, not armor, then having to choose between ward or regen. I believe that is the case. I believe that is the case. And right now, like, I like that interaction. Let's double check that. Ward saves represent blah, blah, blah. The armor value of a ward save will always be shown, blah, blah, blah. Ward save can never be modified by the AP of a weapon. More than one save. A model can make both armor save and ward save. If it is failed, okay. Well, let's double check regeneration then. Okay, okay, okay. Yep, it is in addition. I thought that was the case, but I wanted to double check it. And again, like if you've got an armor save, a ward save, and a regen save, even if they're all 6, that's 3 times you get to try to stay on the table, assuming your opponent doesn't have any AP. Like, that is definitely better than not having any of them or only 2 of them. Like, if I get to roll 3 dice in an attempt to shut off your damage, I'm going to do it. Yes, regen wound still taken. toward combat resolution, and wards are taken per damage, if I remember right, not per failed save. Yep, because it's against any wounds suffered. So ward saves, if you're a 40k player, or even yeah, not Sigmar, because I said I said feel no pain, and the dude looked at me like I was crazy. Uh, ward saves are going to interact just like a feel no pain for the most part. If you're a 40k player, that's your analogy, that's your analog. I did. I was at a Sigmar event, and I was like, yeah, man, I got a 5-up feel no pain, and he stared at me like I was crazy because he's never played 40k, and I was like, what? And he was like, I don't know what that means. I was like, oh yeah. Sorry. So I had to like retrain my brain for the different terminology. All right. So, well, I just botched that, didn't I? Yep. All right. Let's jump back up to the top so we can go back to the characters. We'll start there. All right. Wood Elf Nobles. We were at the Branch Witch, Tree Man Ancients. And as I play more games, we'll kind of talk about army construction and like list building and stuff like that. And we're going to talk about some different things because locally we're looking at implementing a different kind of scoring packet. And depending on if the data slate for 40K is out by the time I'm done, if it comes out today, maybe we'll touch on that a little bit again. I talked about it Tuesday. Maybe we'll talk about it again today. Every branch witch. Yep. Okay, cool. These are super cool, man. I love them. Character mounts. The lords or captains, so the non-wizards, can go on an elven steed, a great stag, a warhawk, or a forest dragon if it's a glade lord, or the great eagle. Bro, forest dragon all day long, just for the cool factor. Don't care. And then the wizards can go on basically everything but the dragon. The elven steed is light cavalry, movement 9, and it's excuse me, blah 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 blah. Here it doesn't say it gives you anything, but as we found when we looked through the goblin and orc stuff, when you see their entry later on, that may not be the case. It's kind of weird. So we'll see. But the Great Stag gives you an additional wound and an additional toughness. And then it has Armored Hide 2, which means it'll add 2 to your saves. A Crown of Antlers, Fear, First Charge, Impact hits, Move through cover, Stomp attack, Swift Stride. Crown of Antlers is, yep, that's what I was going to say. It's probably just some attacks. Impact hits by this model have Armor Bane and Armor Piercing. That's pretty meaty. What I wanted to know about First Charge. Let's look at First Charge. I don't know what that is. If this unit's first charge of the game is successful, the charge target becomes disrupted. Okay, cool. The Unicorn gives you an additional wound. It also moves 10. It's on a big fat base, 40 by 60. And then it has Armor Bane 2 for the Unicorn only, so it's little horn, right? Yes, correct. You got it. So Disrupted could be very powerful. Unicorn only, Armored Hide 1. Interesting. Armor Bane, Armor Hide 1, so it adds 1 to saves. Beguiling Aura, which is, we'll get into that. Countercharge. Countercharge is such a neat concept. I need to dig into that a bit more. I watched the Old World Battle Report and saw the Knights doing it, and I was like, oh my god, I love this. Magical Attack, Stomp Attack, Swift Stride. All of my knowledge of the rules comes from the last 5 days watching videos of other people play. Bro, I've been there, right? Like, I've been there. And like I said, Friday, I'm going to have 3 games where I'm teaching people how to play, and it's going to be very good for me to see how the game interacts firsthand rather than just like secondhand. And once people start getting their armies built up, I'll start streaming more games of it. Like, I'll work it into my stream rotation. Right now, we do Sigmar and we do 40K, but we're going to start doing Blood Bowl and Old World as people kind of build up their teams and armies. Warhawk. +1 toughness. Obviously, it doesn't move 2 inches. It has a fly move. Fly 10. Evasive, fear, feigned flight, swift stride, blah, 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 blah. Wicked claws, feigned flight. Again, fantastic rule. Fantastic rule. All right, Wood Elf Archers. So we're going to look at the Glade Guard with the Lord's Bowman. And they're just weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4. So again, very standard stat line. The Deepwood Scouts are going to be pretty much the same. All right. And then the Glade Guard. You have to take at least 1 unit of Glade Guard. And then you can give. I do like how the mounts add wounds and stuff to the character profiles. I do. I like the way the mounts interact now a lot. Because that is one thing that always felt weird. Was like, if you had a horse, having to randomize attacks between the rider and the horse was kind of weird. And then in addition, just like a archer gets a lucky slap on my knight and he's just instantly dead. So it's one of those, like, I think the additional toughness and or wound, depending on what your mount is fantastic. And I like that there's still things that interact with the save, but we're not having these like 0-up save knights that are running the battlefield also. Any units can take advantage of the blah, blah, blah. Any unit can upgrade. Yeah. So Glade Guard. 1 Glade Guard unit per 1,000 points can have the Fire and Flee special rule at an additional point per model, which again, worth. Have the Vanguard special rule at 1 point per model, which is the pregame move, and then can also purchase a magical standard up to. So for every 1,000 points, you either get this, this, or this. And then obviously they have Elven Reflexes, move through cover, open order. So these have open order, which we covered in a video. If you didn't see it, check on my YouTube channel. It is there. We discussed what the different unit sizes and orders do for you. Very good to look at so that you can have a good, thorough understanding. And if you haven't seen my YouTube videos, it will give you a glimpse into what my channel is about. Like, I do a lot of how-tos where I try to walk people through some of the more complicated interactions in games, and I try to break it down as simply as possible. And then the scouts are the skirmishers. Okay. And then there's a limit on the scouts you can take. I don't remember what it is now because that page is long gone. Let's scroll up. We're on page 129. So let's jump back up to Army Comp. Boop. You can take 1 unit as core per 1,000 points. That's all it was. Okay. That's interesting. So the scouts, if I remember right, might have been the ones that had the limit before. Are they skirmish? No, but yes. So the Deepwood Scouts, if I remember right, like in 7th edition, you couldn't have more scouts than you had Glade Guard. The Eternal Guard, and I want to say these are the melee guys. Hand weapons, Azray spears, and light armor. Yep, the entire unit can take shields at an additional point per model. And then you can blah, 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 blah. An Eternal Warden, so your sergeant or unit champion can take magic items. And then you can give them drilled or veteran. Gosh, I have to look this up every time. Drilled. Okay. Unless it is fleeing, you can perform a free redress. The ranks maneuver immediately before moving. Once it's complete, the unit moves as normal. In addition, a drilled unit can march while within 8 inches of an enemy opponent. Okay, so let's look at redress the ranks. Units can redress their ranks by moving models to or from their rear ranks to decrease. Okay. That's kind of what I thought it would be, because a reform now changes you from closed order to open order. So the redress is just kind of the old reform where you're just changing your unit shape or size. Perfect, perfect, perfect. And then the veterans, they get to reroll leadership. That's what it was. Failed panic tests. So they have close order, which makes sense. Elven reflexes, martial prowess, move through cover, and stubborn. Martial prowess. A unit with this special rule can make supporting attacks to its flank or rear. Damn. And then the Azrai Spear has fight and extra rank. And then you only get the AP. You don't get supporting attacks in a turn in which you charge. And during a turn in which you charge, or you were charged in your front arc, you gain a +1 modifier to your initiative. So you get an initiative bonus to get charged, which again for spears makes sense. I like it. Wildwood Rangers. I know it's Rangers. Let's see. Hand weapons, Rangers Glaives. What do the Rangers Glaives do? Add break. Oh man, I missed it. Rangers Glaives. Combat strength +2, -2 AP, requires 2 hands. That's pretty good. Unit may take shields. Any unit may upgrade a model to Wildwood Warden, upgrade to a standard bearer, blah, 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 blah. So they have close order, elven reflexes. Guardians of the Wildwood, while this is in base contact with an enemy model that causes fear or terror, a model with this special rule gets a +1 modifier to its attack characteristics to a maximum of 10 and multiple wounds 2. So these are going to be like your monster hunters. That's as long as you know you're hitting something with fear or terror, that's phenomenal. And then they have Guardians of the Wildwood, immune to psychology. Yeah, these are going to be very good units. Like obviously they're not going to be amazing into enemy infantry, but having a unit that can smack into something that causes fear or terror, they'll help clean up any kind of like undead because a lot of those will cause fear and terror. So that's going to be very good. We're going to give Twitch 17 seconds to come back so we can look at War Dancers because I love War Dancers and they make me happy. Again, they're gorgeous models. Let's look up. And even for as old as some of these are, they're just super nice. I love these. If we got new ones, I wouldn't complain, but I love these silly things. So, War Dancers, let's talk about them. Their weapon skill is 6, ballistic skill is 4. Obviously, they're going to be strength 3, T3. They're still just elves, 1 wound. They will just die. It do be how it is. 16 points a model. You can take 5 plus hand weapons. Any model in the unit can take the following. You can take an additional hand weapon for 1 point per model. You can take a throwing spear for free. I used to have the War Dancers in metal about 15 years ago. You and me both, man. Actually, it was about 10 to 15 years ago. I had quite a few of them. I lost them all. If I had I don't want to talk about how many times I've just like lost armies for various reasons, whether I got rid of them, they got stolen, etc. But is what it is. I think this particular army, if I remember right, I was dating a girl and I had left them at her apartment and we broke up and she didn't give me a chance to come get stuff and she just left them on the curb. And by the time I went to go, like, by the time I found out my shit was just on the curb, that army was gone. So somebody either knew what they were or just didn't give a shit and took them. Either way, it was big sad. Nice. High elves are pretty fun. You could take your champion, obviously standard bearer musician. You could take a magic standard. Magic items up to 25 on the champion. They get Dances of Loic, which is going to be the main thing we need to talk about. Let's look at evasive real quick. Once per turn, when this unit is declared the target during the enemy shooting phase, it may choose to fall back in good order. What the hell? Once per turn, when this unit is declared the target during the enemy shooting phase, it may choose to fall back in good order and will flee directly away from the enemy unit shooting at it. Once this unit has completed its move, the enemy unit may continue with its shooting as declared. That's pretty interesting. It's a fall back in good order and you flee. I'll have to actually look at those two rules and see how they would interact. Let's see. Let's look right now. Fall back in good order. Of course, that's gonna. Yep. Rules. will often call give ground or fall back in good order. Most often they will do this. Give ground, fall back in good order. When a unit falls back in good order is beating a hasty retreat. When making its flee roll, a unit that falls back in good order rolls 2d6 and discards the lowest. And then you automatically rally. Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Perfect. That's actually kind of cool. I like that. Immune to psychology, loner, so they can only have a character with loner join them, which would be their shadow dancer. Motley Crew. Motley Crew means you can take different weapon loadouts on different models in the unit, and then you can move through cover, open order, skirmisher, strike first, talismanic tattoos. Talismanic tattoos is your ward save, and I don't think they have armor, right? That makes sense. They just have your ward. Dances of Loic. When this unit combat is chosen during step 1, blah, 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 blah. So when you start your fights and you pick this unit to fight, you choose one dance and every model performs it. If they fall back in good order, does that count as having moved? Could you use that to make your opponent -1 to hit? You know, we'll dig into that as soon as I get done. I don't know. That's a good question. No. It's when they're declared as the target. So we'll get into that in a second. Let's see. Whirling Death. Until the end of this combat phase, the armor-piercing characteristic of this unit's weapon is improved by 2. And that's right there is probably why I would consider giving the character the D3 extra attacks hand weapons, right? Because now we could just make them all AP2. You can give them extra attacks +1 if you wanted to. So if you take the spear, you could get an additional attack. You could give them a 4-up ward save, which is also really good. And then Woven Mist, anytime you can make them -1 to hit. So all the dances are very good. They're going to impact your unit. Let's talk about that. Let's see. Let's jump down to the tables. Actually, let's jump up to the table of contents. Because we got links. Links for days, honey. Maybe. Oh, God. I pissed it off. I just hope it doesn't crash. Sometimes, man. Sometimes stuff is just like, I don't want to do this today. Let's see. Panic test, psychology, shooting phase. I just want to see overview of the game, templates, model profiles, characteristics, formation types. I would assume, there we go. I just didn't. Quick reference. I just want to see if there's a modifiers table, right? If you move and shoot, you're -1 to hit. Firing at long range is -1 to hit. Standing and shooting is -1 to hit. So I don't see anything that says if your opponent moves. But if you move into their long range, you could make them -1 to hit. And maybe I'm missing something. I'm not going to dig into the whole shooting rules. But if you fall back into their long range, if you flee into their long range, you absolutely would incur the -1 to hit penalty because that is the order of operations. Let's double check that. It's when it's declared as the target during the enemy shooting phase, you can fall back, and then once it's completed the move, the enemy unit continues its shooting. So if you fall back and move into long range, yes, you could give them the -1 to hit. Way Watchers, let's see, and that's just another, I think, Elven Reflexes, Fire and Flee, Move Through Cover, Scout Skirmishers, another skirmish unit. Ooh, those might have been the one I was thinking of that were limited. Either way, we know. There was one that was limited. Let's look at Dryads. They're pretty cool. And again, we're looking at hand weapons. They have light armor, so a 6-up save. That could be used in some injury. Absolutely. There's a lot of weird things you could do with that. A lot of weird things you could do with that. That's, again, one of the draws I have to Wood Elves is they're not an easy army to play, but if you know how to use them, they have a lot of weird shenanigans that you can take advantage of. That's also why I like Drukhari so much in the previous editions of 40K. Right now, not so much. I do play them, but they don't really have a lot of the weird kind of like mobility things that they used to have so that they would reward you if you were good at the game. Unit may upgrade one model to a nymph, blah, 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 blah. So they have fear, they have flammable, immune to psychology, magical attacks, move through cover, open order, regeneration, skirmishers, stubborn, and tree spirit. Again, very, very standard stuff, right? Like, they're not crazy. They have regen. We're going to make sure Tree Spirit gives a ward save. It used to. They might have gotten rid of it and just replaced it with regen. Treekin. Now, these are the bigger ones. They're not the big tree lords, but they're the medium ones. Like, I am going to be using Kurnos Hunters for them because they're big, they're chunky, they look really cool. They have handwoods and hardwood flesh, and then you can give them spites. They have armor bane, close order, fear, flammable, immune to psychology, blah 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 blah. A tree spirit and tree whack. So again, like, these are really cool. And at 50 points a model, they're not cheap, but they do have 3 wounds and T5. Their save is heavy armor, so they're going to have a 5-up save. So they're not going to necessarily stay on the table for a long time, guys. Like, that's something to keep in mind is, yeah, they've got 3 wounds, but at a 5-up save and a regen of 5-up, you are not looking at sticking around for a long, long time. Glade Riders are the light cavalry. They're fast cav, or at least used to be. They are spear, bow. They're a really good utility unit that can do a lot of harassing, and you can use them if you know what you're doing. You can use them for a lot of like flanking charges and stuff like that. So they're a really good support unit that isn't necessarily going to put out a lot of damage, but they're going to help you in your positioning, and they're going to support your harder hitting charging units to help kind of secure that what's the word I'm looking for, that good positioning in melee, and then being able to shoot, right? Giving them arrows is going to help them just be effective at harassment. So these are going to be very much like a guerrilla unit that you're going to use to harass until you can line up a couple good charges. Elven reflexes, fast cavalry, fire and flee. So again, fire and flee is very good. And 18 points a model. But again, we're looking at 1 wound, and they probably have like a 3-up save. And they don't even... God dang. They don't get shit. They're still T3 1 wound, it looks like. So, yeah, don't look forward to them staying on the table. You will have to know how to use these. Yep. And that's it, is they've got a good mobility. At 9 inches is not terrible in this game. This is not a game where you're going to have a lot of 12, 16-inch movements. So 9-inch movement is pretty good. And then light cav, blah, 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 blah. Fire and flee will help them. Fast cavalry will help them. So they have a lot of things that will help keep them moving. Sisters of the Thorn, light cavalry, hand, and javelins. Let's see. Bam, bam, bam. The steed. Again, nothing crazy. Hand weapons and Blackbriar javelins, hooves. Handmaiden of the Thorn. Daughters of Eternity. They have a 4-up ward. That's pretty spicy. Deepwood Coven. A unit of the Sisters of the Thorn knows a single spell chosen by their controlling player before armies are deployed. From either the battle magic or elementalism lore of magic, the unit may cast this spell as a bound spell. If the unit includes a Handmaiden of the Thorn, it can cast a spell with a power level of 1. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Cool. That's cool. Being able to just cast a spell. Very, very useful. And then the javelins, quick shot, move and shoot. And they're strength 3, AP 1. So again, very solid. Wild Riders. Didn't we just look at those? Glade Riders. Okay. I was like, man. And they have hunting spears, light armor. So again, we're just looking at another cavalry unit. These are strength 4, though. And then their hunting spears are going to be strength 4, strength 5, -2, armor bane 1. But you can only use the spear in a turn in which you charged. After that, or any other turns, you have to use your hand weapon. So, again, and that's one of those where that makes sense. Like, this is how the army interacts, is you have to keep moving, you have to be on the offensive, and you have to have good positioning. Now, if we get them on the table and they're just like super dumb, oh well, sorry I lied. But historically, that's how they've handled. Hand weapons, cavalry, spear, and Azray longbows. These are the Warhawk Riders, Wicked Claws. Again, we're looking at 2 wounds, T4. I don't see any kind of save on these guys. And that's kind of what I figured was going to happen here. Any unit can take one of the following types of arrows. A unit can upgrade hand weapons, cavalry, spear. Yeah, no. So, yeah, be very careful. There's nothing in here that's giving a save. Elven reflexes, evasive, fear, feint flight, fire and flee, fly, skirmishers, and swift stride. It's funny. Forest dragons give you +3 toughness, +6 wounds. Yeah, it's going to be positioning. It's going to be screening. It's going to be understanding how to use cheaper units to protect your more expensive units by line of sight blocking certain things. Like, it's not just the shooting and the range. It's going to be just understanding how to position certain units in a way that you can be like, well, you don't get to shoot me now. You have to shoot them instead. Because remember, your units block line of sight, just like my units block line of sight. You can't shoot through your own units. You can't shoot through other units, with a few exceptions. So, what I would want to do is learn how to use those dryads or even just some glade guards to kind of put them up front and screen my harder hitting units as they come up the table. And then obviously terrain will be important. You're going to want some kind of like hills, trees, things that can kind of break up the big line of sight shooting lanes, not just for elves, but for against elves also. And even dwarves. Like, you don't want massive shooting lanes so that the game just becomes 40k and it's just whoever brings more guns is going to win. All right, so Armor Bane, blah, 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 blah. So the dragons have a lot. And they look so fun, right? They're almost 300 points. And you can only take it if it's a mount. You can't take it on its own. And then it has 6 attacks. And then it must make 1 serrated maw attack. Everything else is claws. I assume you could maybe break them up differently. It doesn't say at least 1. It says 1 of its attacks. So there's a good chance the intent here is that it only gets 1 bite, and then the rest have to be claws. Which, again, makes sense given the bite profile. Like, if I could just do 6 bites, I would. So logic is telling me you get 1 bite and 5 claws. And then it gets its breath weapon. Ward and regen saves can be attempted. The blah, 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 blah. Okay. Great Eagles. Oh, actually, real quick. Okay, he's got draconic scales. I was just looking to see what kind of like armor he had. This is where I look at the dragon for 275 and look at the Arachnarok spider and get sad that the spider's 300 plus points and objectively worse. Man. There was something about that spider though. Is this 310 points? Let me get to, is this his actual profile? Because you're talking about it as a mount or as a standalone unit. Because as a standalone unit at 310 points, he's 6. But you got to remember that the dragon will also have the cost of the rider added into it, and you can only take the Lord on the rider, and the Lord was like 150 plus points. So the total unit's going to be 400, 450 points minimum. And then, like, I'm not going to say it's better or worse. I'd have to really dig into it and compare. But the spider you have the option of taking separately, which I assume is probably why it's pointed the way it is. If you could take the dragon separately, I would imagine the dragon would be pointed a bit higher as well. But because you've already got to take the hero tax to get the dragon, that's my assumption as to why it's cheaper. Great Eagles, Tree Men, which we're not going to dig into these. They're not going to be that different than the Ancient, other than they're not going to be wizards. Forest Spites, so we're in the home stretch now. Let's see, Forest Spites. A Blight of Terrors is 50 points, and it gives this model and any unit it joins the Terror special rule. There's quite a few things you could put that on that could make it very good. You know, again, we're not going to dig into it, but hey, causing terror is pretty good. A Muster of Malevolence. You can only take it on the Nobles or Waste Stalkers, and any model hit by one or more of the shooting attacks suffers an additional D3 Strength 2 hits with an AP of 0, but they have Armor Bane. Armor Bane. I don't know why I had to say it like a pirate. But yeah, no, again, solid. I don't know if it's 40 points worth of solid, but it's still pretty solid, you know, because you only get an additional D3 hits, and they're just Strength 2. Obviously, if you get those 6s, they're going to be pretty good. Like I said, I don't know that it's 40 points worth of good, but they're not terrible. Like, extra attacks is still extra attacks. And being able to get bonus shots when you're shooting is better than not getting them. Single enemy unit that is in base contact. Real quick. Yep, each spite may be only chosen once per army. I thought that was the case. During the combat phase, a single enemy unit with -1 to its weapon skill and initiative characteristics. So the Befuddlement of Mischiefs, very good. There's definitely a lot of play for that one for a lot of reasons. Anything that lowers your opponent's initiative and weapon skill is going to be very good in a game that's generally centered around melee. Murder of Spites, that one used to be really good. I know that. The suffer D3, strength 2, AP 1 hits, so it's just bonus attacks. Pretty solid. I would probably take the Mischiefs over that, but a Lamentation of Despairs. Unless this model is fleeing, enemy units that are within 6 inches suffer a -1 penalty to their leadership characteristic when making a fear, panic, or terror test. So that's actually one that's going to be pretty solid on something like your Tree Lords, because they already cause fear. Maybe they cause terror. I forget which it is, but they cause one of the two. And being able to modify that just makes it better. Well, hopefully they don't, like, I'm hopeful that leadership isn't important the way it used to be. Like, you're just failing leaderships and picking up your whole army. But I definitely feel like you're right. Interacting with initiative and leadership is going to be key. We'll see as GW kind of does the first wave of releases and how things go. An Annoyance of Nettlings. While this is engaged, its opponent -1. -1 to hit in challenges, that's okay. Like, if you've got something that you plan on just going and killing characters with challenges, solid. This model in any attack special rule. We're not going to dig through all of these. We've kind of talked a lot about that stuff. Let's find the special rules, and then we're going to take a break. We may just stop. It's going to depend on if the data slate's dropped. Actually, we're going to take a quick break because I need some water real fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this screen up, but I'm going to turn my mic off. I'm going to go grab some water, and I'll be back in about 3 to 5 minutes. I appreciate it. I had to stop and get some water, and I muted my mic, and I forgot to unmute it. Thank you. All right, there we go. So let's go back. So Talismanic Tattoos does give you a 6-up ward. Tree Spirit doesn't give you a ward save anymore. In previous editions, all the tree stuff had a ward save. It has now shifted to just regen. I wasn't sure when we first covered it, but that's why I wanted to make sure we looked. So you won't get the ward. It's just saying you can only put Tree Spirit characters with Tree Spirit units and etc. And then Tree Whack. Once per turn during your combat phase, a model with this special rule may use one of its attacks to make a Tree Whack attack. To make a Tree Whack attack, you nominate a single model within an enemy unit that is engaged in combat to be the target of the attack. That model must immediately make an initiative test. If it's failed, it suffers D3 hits using the strength of this model with no armor save permitted, ward and regens attempted as normal. If it's passed, nothing happens. So that's kind of cool. Like being able to just be like, all right, here's my attacks. I'm gonna do one really big bonk, especially because like all of those things have pretty solid whacks anyway. Once players have finished placing terrain, a Wood Elf Realms player may choose one additional wood measuring between 8 and 12 inches at its widest point. This may be placed anywhere on the battlefield that is not near their opponent's deployment zone and not within 12 inches of the center of the battlefield. So I'm guessing, without measuring, I'm guessing this is roughly the size of the Wildwoods. I'd have to measure it. I have some, but they're over there. I'm not grabbing them right now. They used to be right here where I could reach them, but I'm kind of shuffling things around as I'm preparing. All of my 40K stuff is kind of getting packed away for the most part because after March, I don't plan on playing in many 40K events, and I plan on really driving my focus a lot on Old World. So a lot of my 40K stuff is going to kind of get put up, and we're going to do a lot of focus on Old World. So as I shuffle and move models, all of the stuff I use commonly will go here and over there. And so that's what's happening. Not that you care, but there we go. The lore of Athaloran. We have a magical vortex. It remains in play. Again, cool. It's a vortex spell. I don't see there being a lot of variance between vortex spells. Forest Walker. This spell can only target friendly Wood Elf character that is completely within a woodland terrain feature. If the target is not fleeing, you may immediately remove it from the battlefield and replace it so that it is completely within a different wood anywhere on the battlefield, but not within 6 inches of enemy models. The target cannot move again during the movement phase. So the fact that it can only target a character is interesting, because you're not going to have a lot of characters just running around by themselves, I don't think. So it's one of those where I'm going to have to look through list building and see what's the best way I could kind of use this. How can I make this work? What's the best unit to use it on? The Forest Dragon does come to mind, like if he's in trouble or if you've got a character that's in a rough spot. He just has to be wholly within a woodland terrain feature. So again, it's one of those where historically you could teleport whole units in the woods. The fact that it's only the character is kind of weird. And then Flock of Doom, you get a 3-inch blast template so that its central hole is directly over the target, blah, 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 blah. Yep, cool. Like, it's very, very straightforward. The longbow is 32-inch range. It is going to be strength user, so strength 3 for most of them. Armor Bane 1 and Volley Fire. Volley Fire is you get to fire with your front rank as normal, and then every subsequent rank you get to fire with half of it, right? So if you have 3 ranks of 5, you're going to get 10 total shots is my assumption. It doesn't say how it's rounded. It could be rounded up. Maybe you get 11. It doesn't matter. But the other thing to remember too is that if you're on a hill, you can fire in the first 2 ranks instead of the first 1, which means you could get more shots. So this is where, again, I know terrain's not dense on these tables, but making sure you have functional terrain that can impact the game is going to be important. You don't just want to put like a cottage on the ground unless you're doing a narrative. I'm not I'm talking purely from like a game balance and competitive play standpoint. You're going to want to make sure you have at least a hill or two. You're going to want to make sure you have some woods, and they don't have to be big, but you're going to want to make sure you have usable, functional terrain. The enchanted arrows, let's take a look at these. These are pretty cool, and you can put these on almost any unit that has a bow, but you can't repeat them, is my assumption. Interesting. So it doesn't say you can't, but if they count as magic items, then you can't because they don't have the asterisk, right? So I'll have to do a little digging on this one before I could say yes or no on it. My initial thought would be probably not because you can't stack the spites, but the spites also specifically say that they're not magic items, and they also specifically say you can't stack them. My assumption is that they are magic items, and you cannot stack them because they don't have the asterisk that says you can. Armor offers no protection against these ensorcelled arrows. They get AP2, so again, man, pretty good. Pretty good, right? And then even a scratch from an arrow, so you can give them poison attacks, which is also pretty good. And there's going to be some units you're going to want that on more than others. Glowing eerily, blah, 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 blah. So you can give them flaming and magical attacks. So again, like, none of these are bad. They all just have a very specific use. These arrows seem to fly from the bow of the multiple shots too. Could be really good because again, now you're doubling the amount of dice coming out of your archer unit. True Flight Arrows has the Ignore Cover and Quick Shot special rules, and these are also really good. The Ignore Cover, I haven't dug into cover enough to know, hey, this is worth, but Quick Shot's worth. There's no penalty for moving and shooting, and then you can stand and shoot regardless of the charge range. And that's going to be it for them. Let me dig back up here. Woodland Ambush. Again, man, words are tough today. I just want to double check something. Can we give anything a ward once per turn? Pretty solid for your wizards. Reroll a failed casting roll. While within 3 inches of a terrain woodland feature, you can increase dispel range by 3 and roll an extra d6 and discard the lowest. Deepwood Sphere. Fleeing. Okay, so you get to bonk somebody. That's fine. They cast a spell within 6 inches of a woods. You get to bonk them. Wailing Arrow, single use, model with Azray longbow only. A wailing arrow can be fired as normal from the bearer's longbow. Any unit that suffers an unsaved wound from this. Okay. Hail of Doom. Yeah, unless. Okay. And I'm just, like, I'm not trying to go through these in depth. I'm just trying to see. Carrying ignore cover. Banner of the Eternal Queen. Carrying the Banner of the Eternal Queen. Okay. Vanguard's good. Gaining fear or terror is good, so it looks like there's probably a couple ways to give different units fear or terror. Helm of the Hunt. Modifier. So this one's really funny, actually. The strength characteristic of the bearer's weapon cannot be modified, but the strength characteristic by any weapons. So, and then the strength characteristic of your opponents cannot be modified by any weapon either. So that's actually really funny. But only when you direct attacks against the bearer, not the bearer's unit. So that's also important to know. Like, this might be good to put on the character that's in your monster hunting unit and just be like, all right, well, maybe not the monster hunting unit, but you know what I mean. Any enemy models must take leadership depth. Yep, so it doesn't really look like it. because these are all weapons. So perfect. So that's what we're going to do. That's the Wood Elves. Overall, I think they look very fun, very flavorful. They look like they have a lot of the same concepts that they've always had, where you're just going to be, if you get out of position, your whole army can just unravel very quickly. And that's, again, how they've historically played. That makes sense to me. Like, that's how most elf armies play for GW. You know, you have these fast, high damage armies that are glass cannons. They're typically the epitome of glass cannon, and that's what this feels like. Now, you do have a couple of interesting options in your tree lords and your dryads and stuff like that. So that's also really cool, and I like that. But even those aren't going to be exceptionally durable or rugged. They're just going to feel a bit more durable or rugged compared to your elves. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to Warcom real quick, which is Warhammer Community. I don't think it's up because I feel like I would have had about 1,000,000 notifications if it was, but we're going to see if this data slate is out yet. Hey, big shock. It doesn't look like it is. I'm not a fan, friend, at all. Yeah. I have been, as a Drukari player, I have been waiting as patiently as I can. And it is just not happening, and I don't know why. Yep, we're still looking at the same thing. Sometimes if you check the UK site, it'll have different stuff, which is funny. I'm none of those, so that's cool. But yeah, sometimes if you check the UK site, they'll have different stuff, which is kind of funny. So what we will do, since we've got probably about 10 to 15 minutes, I just want to touch on scoring briefly. I'm not going to get real in depth on it. I just talked about it in a video not that long ago. So GW has written this game so that removal is basically the main way you're going to score points. And what I mean by that is the only way to score, and it's not the only way, but most, if not all of your points are going to come from removing your enemy's models. You know, a lot of your victory points are like you gain points based off of killing units, you gain points based off of fleeing units, etc. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Just like we just talked about, there's nothing wrong with that. What I personally as a player don't like necessarily about that is, as a person who played 8th Ed 40K, 9th Ed 40K, and now 10th Ed 40K, right? I have a strong 40K background over the last 5 years or so. 6, probably more. Whatever. Whenever 8th Ed came out. Those games were at their worst when the whole game just centered on removal. Because it became who can build the biggest Alpha Strike damage dealing army, and then can we make this game hinge on a 50-50 die roll? And as a player, I don't think that's very fun, personally, when the game devolves to that level. And I'm not saying this game will, and I'm not saying that all games do. I'm saying that when games tend to revolve around removal, especially when they're structured the way Games Workshop games are structured, where it's you go, I go, and there's not a lot of back and forth, they tend to kind of devolve into that. And if you look at the beginning of ninth, when armies had like crazy go first win rates, a lot of those go first win rates were predicated on I'm going to do 1,000+ points of damage to you on my first turn because there's nothing to mitigate me from forward deploying up to your deployment zone. There's nothing to mitigate me from scout moving into your deployment zone. And I'm just going to basically stack the whole deployment zone and apply pressure. And then if I win the roll off, you lose. Like, that's it. So it's one of those where, as a person who's seen games devolve to that, what I have been working on is a scoring packet that rewards players for removal, but also gives players other options for scoring points. And I know that's, again, for everybody that's watching, I know that's not the only way you can score points. Like there's terrain features that can score you points. There's certain scenarios that score different points. I get that, but I'm saying based on the way the rules are written, a lot of your points are coming from removal. What I'm trying to do is half your points come from removal, and then half your points will really just come from good positioning and understanding how to move and interact with the game. And a good example is basically like if you have a wizard, you can forego all your casting in order to, and if you've played, I think it was 8th Ed 40K, 9th Ed 40K, right, you're going to recognize this objective. You can make a casting attempt in the middle of the board, and then you'll just score some points. And then if you do it in your opponent's deployment zone, you'll score some points. But it can still be dispelled by your opponent as well. So it's not automatic points, and you have to give up casting with one wizard. And with everybody having access to a dispel, it incorporates a very interesting interaction. And it's not just wizards. We decided to open it up to priests because I forgot that there are a couple armies out there that just don't have access to wizards. Opening it up to priests, it'll still cast like a spell, simply because I don't want to write a whole new mechanic for wizards and or priests, and then again, the goal is to give it a simplicity that allows players to interact with the game a little bit differently and create a little bit more dynamic interaction where it's like, okay, I have two wizards, one's in the middle of the board. Now I can cast his spell, or I can try to score some points. If I cast over here, I could try to fish that deny out or dispel, and then go ahead and cast right here and get my points. Like it's one of those where it just creates a little bit different dynamic and creates a little bit different positioning. And that's just one example. There's others based on like controlling table quarters and stuff like that. We are going to be play testing that over the next probably month or two. I've got like a Google Forms. I'm going to be stat tracking it. It's going to break down which armies can score, which armies aren't scoring, what the win rate is for these armies. I'm running an event. We're going to use it at the event. Like I am going to have a lot of bookkeeping that I'm going to be doing over the next probably 6 months as I kind of streamline this. Uh, Tweak it, fix it, etc. I've been working with a couple of my buddies who are big into the competitive scene for both 40K and Sigmar. And we're all kind of coming together to try to create a packet that's fun, fair, and balanced, and creates a old world experience that isn't simply just flood my opponent's deployment zone turn one, see if I can kill them. If I don't kill them, see if they don't kill me, right? Like I'm trying to get ahead of that de-evolution, and maybe I don't need to. Maybe this game will come out and it doesn't hit that point. We're going to see. But as a person who's, like I said, played Games Workshop games and understands how a lot of them go competitively, that's what I'm trying to get ahead of. Sigmar has that interaction with some armies. 40K has had that interaction historically. And again, I enjoy Sigmar. I think it's a fun game, but there's just certain armies where if I get across the table from them, I already know that they're like, okay, my whole army's one drop. I'm going to go first, and then I'm going to get in your deployment zone, and I'm going to do as much damage as I can. So it's one of those where I get it, and I'm not mad about it. But if we can kind of get ahead of it and try to promote players to bring a diversity of units and try to promote players to kind of look at different aspects of the game, I think it'll make for a more fun and healthy community. And maybe I'm wrong. It's happened before. But if you guys have thoughts on it, feel free to let me know in the comments. If you're just like, hey man, it's fine the way it is, I'm interested to hear that feedback. I would be curious to know what the general consensus is based on others who have either played or read the rules. And again, maybe I don't need to fix what isn't necessarily broken, but again, just as a person who's had this long time interaction with Games Workshop games, I already have a strong feeling of how this could go. And one of the things that made me get ahead of it already was I've already seen people talking about, well, if you play this army, you could literally have your whole army in your opponent's deployment zone turn one, blah 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 blah. And it's just like, yep, Awesome. Like this is what we're trying to avoid is trying to get these like hyper aggressive turn one alpha strikes so that your opponent doesn't feel like, well, cool, why did I bother putting models on the table, right? Like we want to reward people for being good at the game, but we still want everybody at the table to have at least some kind of fun. That's the goal. So, thanks for hanging out. I guess we're not going to discuss the 40K data slate today because I guess we're just not going to get it. That makes me a little sad because I wanted to know if my Dark Elves were getting basically packed up, uh, or or if I was at least going to be able to have like a last hurrah with them. Oh well, we'll see. Have a good one, guys.